So my name is Randy Pettus. I'm a senior partner sales engineer at Snowflake. And today I'm excited to talk to you about how you can supercharge your data pipelines with Snowflake and dbt, of course, using Gen AI and machine learning. So just a quick disclaimer regarding some of the features we're going to be talking about today, Snowflake features specifically. But what I want to do is just open up with a question, just to think about internally, and that's what are some of your top Gen AI use cases at your company? Some of you might not actually know, or maybe your company is in the process of formulating this. But the whole point here is just to think about, even based on what we saw and heard this morning in the keynote, what are some of those top Gen AI use cases? How might that relate to your company? And so if I took a poll, I would expect probably most of us in this room, the first kind of application that would come to mind whenever you think of your company and Gen AI would likely be something like this. Conversational assistant, chatbot, that's become very popular, obviously, with like ChatGPT and those similar tools that are out there today. But what we're going to see is that it's not necessarily about just conversational agent or assistants. It's not just about chatbots. There's other capabilities with automated BI. You could throw Copilot, code assistants into this category as well. But then there's things like text processing and summarization, which we'll spend a lot of time talking about this, particularly today. But the concept here is really how can we supercharge our data pipelines with AI and machine learning? And in order to think about this, one thing that we'll kind of keep coming back to in this talk today is really where do you have decisions that are repeated? These could be actions, that you have business users that are looking to take, decisions that they're making. But the key concept is where are those repeated? And if you have repeated decisions, if you have repeated actions, that seems a lot like what we're used to with your typical kind of BI case where you have data pipelines. And so that's really what we're going to focus in on today is how can you scale, how can you make repeatable decisions with Gen AI and machine learning? So the concept here is we have business users that need to make those repeated decisions, repeated actions. We have all these different types of data sources. You might have things like classification that you need to do, document classification, text classification, sentiment analysis. You have text processing where you need to do translation, parsing, identify different entities from your text, and then summarize your text. But it's not all text-based, right? We also have files, we have images, we have video, audio that you want to be able to leverage Gen AI to extract meaning from those. Again, where can that help from a repeated decision? And it's not always necessarily pool-based. A lot of what I was just referring to is kind of extracting out types of information. But in some cases, we want to actually have more of like a push mechanism of how can you generate content? So you have a table of all these different users. How do I generate the right message for the right person? And so what we're going to see is how dbt and Snowflake together really do this well to leverage Gen AI and machine learning in your pipelines. So I'm going to just give a real quick example use case in a particular industry, just to kind of set the stage here. And by the way, a lot of this, what we're going to talk today is kind of intended to be a little bit high level to get us thinking about, where can we leverage this type of technology, these kind of capabilities within our pipelines, but kind of giving a little bit of a blueprint that then you can then explore, apply to your different use cases at your company. But just to show you where we're going, we're going to talk about automating text processing, RAG pipelines, retrieval augmented generation pipelines, unstructured document extraction. A little bit on the ML side. We're not going to have a whole lot of time to cover that, but just want to touch on a couple features there. And again, why Snowflake and dbt together do this so well. So that use case that I want to just start out, in this case, is the banking asset management world. And so, obviously, your own industry, your own company, you're going to have your own use cases. But this is kind of just to kind of set the stage of what are some of these types of tasks that are more like batch-oriented. And again, not necessarily just like a chatbot. So you might have the need to analyze content. So you have merger and acquisition deal terms. You want to be able to extract sentiment from news. You need the ability to categorize, all these 10K filings where you have a lot of text in there, and you want to be able to do some kind of classification on that text. Even, classify, is this bearish, is this bullish? And do that at scale, where as soon as the 10K filing's out, boom, you have your answer. And then again, extracting different types of information. So you might have an unstructured document where you want to go and pinpoint this very specific item that you're looking for, again, at scale. And then summarizing and generation. A good example here is where you have financial advisors meeting with a client, and that financial advisor, instead of them having to take the notes, will have those notes transcribed, summarized, and then use an LLM to generate a very specific action or product recommendations for their clients. So again, just some examples in one industry here. Hopefully you can think about where that applies with your particular company. So let's see what this looks like in the text processing world. But to start out, I just want to set the stage with some Snowflake functionality here, just so we're all on the same plane. But within Snowflake, for those of you that don't know, we're a unified, fully managed platform for all your data and Gen AI and machine learning needs. And so we're going to make this really easy for you to leverage AI. We're going to make it efficient for you, and then we're going to make this trusted. And so one of the big concepts here is that instead of you having to take your data, send it off to somewhere else, instead you can leverage this model, or this LLMs, for instance. You can leverage that directly where your data already is. And so you have that trust there. I mentioned Snowflake is easy. This just kind of gives more of a picture of what our capabilities are on the AI front. So at the foundation here, we have different foundation models. We have task-specific embedding models, and the ability to do fine-tuning as well. Above that, we have chat capabilities. This is going to allow you to chat with, for instance, structured data with Cortex Analyst. We have Cortex Search for documents. And then there's Studio to make it easy for you to just have a UI, for instance. We have Copilot and Document AI, which I'll cover Document AI in more detail in just a bit. So just to kind of go a little bit more in depth in some of our large language model and Cortex AI capabilities. I mentioned all these different kind of tasks earlier, extracting out answers, sentiment, summarization, translation. Well, we have some really nice, just super easy to use functions that can do this within your pipeline already today. In addition to that, we have foundation models, pre-trained models that you can leverage, and we'll see this a little bit more in more detail. And anything that we don't have out of the box, that's where Snowpark Container Services can come in too, where if there's another model that you want to reference, leverage, that's where something you can just leverage Snowpark Container Services to insert it into your workflow. So with that foundation, let's talk about text processing. And so again, I mentioned I'm going to have these just kind of little blueprints. This is just to get you to thinking about, again, how could this work within Snowflake and dbt? And we'll see, again, why these work really well together. So with text processing, let's go back to our financial advisor or in the finance realm. Say we have a product manager that's looking to make better products for their clients. And then we have a data source that represents feedback for those clients. If that feedback isn't just a bunch of text, ideally we want to be able to leverage some kind of capability, again, to scale those decisions, scale those actions that the product manager might want to do to improve their products. And so what we're showing here is the case of using Snowflake Cortex Complete to take a data source. In this case, we have a table called customer feedback. And in that customer feedback table, we have one column that represents the content. And that's that text feedback that you have in this particular table. And in this case, we're going to use Snowflake Cortex Complete to leverage the same type of prompting that you would do to ChatGPT, for instance. And in this case, I'm going to say, hey, summarize this feedback in less than 100 words. I'm giving it very specific instructions and say, hey, well, now summarize this for me in JSON format. And then this can be used then downstream to help facilitate those product recommendations. Well, where does dbt come in here? Well, we're going to actually orchestrate this, leveraging dbt. And in this case, it's not just like we have this static table, right? We have new records that are coming in over time with feedback that's where we can leverage, like for instance, the DBT's incremental materialization to do this only on our new records as they come in. And because you don't want to keep on referencing Snowflake Cortex Complete over and over again in your models, and so this is a really nice way to facilitate that incremental processing and saving you money at the same time. But again, what is this meant to show? Just the very quick blueprint of what this looks like to process text at scale, I should say. We're not just doing this from a one-off ad hoc prompt. This is done on all this feedback that you have in your table. So let's talk about RAG next, which is retrieval augmented generation. And so if you're not familiar with this concept, basically, this is your ability to take unstructured text, and you can't necessarily just throw all of that text into a large language model. There's context limits within these LLMs. And so the whole point of RAG is, how can you chunk up that text and then leverage an embedding model to convert that text into a numerical representation, and then that is used in this process. If I have a question, how do I extract out just the vectors or basically the text that's most similar to the question I'm asking? And so within Snowflake, we have Cortex Search to do this in a managed platform. It's more intended for, you have a document that you're loading, and not necessarily, though, from a pipeline perspective. And what we know, though, is that a lot of times it's not just necessarily this one-time document. Like if you look at a lot of demos that are in the RAG space right now, it's like, okay, I load in my document and I start chatting with it. Well, the real world is more complicated than that, right? We have new documents that are coming into our environment. We want to be able to leverage that, again, at scale. And so that's where DBT comes in again. So I have two kind of parallel paths here. The first is, say we have structured or semi-structured data that's coming through. Pretty much immediately in Snowflake, we can take that text data that's in one of our columns and use our Snowflake Cortex embed text functions to take that text and easily convert that into an embedding that can be then used in your downstream RAG pipelines. So, a perfect example here would be you do have some kind of chatbot that's sitting at the end of this that users can leverage. But in this case, we're automating that pipeline. So again, as new documents are coming in, DBT, we can leverage the incremental materialization to process new records as they come into our environment. But we also have the capability here of not just leveraging our structured sources. You can actually leverage the directory table in Snowflake to go and pull the different metadata regarding our PDFs or other sources that you have there. Use a user-defined Python function, for instance, to go then and extract out the text from a PDF and then feed that into your embedding model here, which then again is used, for instance, in your downstream RAG pipelines. So this is a very popular use case right now. Again, the whole point though is how do we leverage this at scale and not just do a one-off load of documents. So another use case that is very, very popular right now is how can you extract out specific pieces of information from documents. And so within Snowflake, we have Document AI, which is currently in public preview. And this is a fully managed workflow where we make it super easy to go in and say I have a PDF document that has this image, and I want to extract out who's the inspector in this case, what's the inspection, was it pass or fail? And so we have this fully managed capability to be able to extract these types of terms. That gets turned into a model, and then again, you can use that model for your pipelines. I have new documents that are coming in. I want to be able to leverage this model to extract out all of my inspection reports. Now I can do that at scale. So again, within DBT, kind of the blueprint here of how this can look, leveraging Document AI, is going to be very similar to what we just saw with that RAG pipeline, where I have a couple documents, or a handful of documents, I should say, where then we create that using Document AI. We create that basically model that's or the predict model that's referenced here, and then we have leveraging our directory table. As new documents are coming in, we can just run those through this predict function, And what happens is you're going to get nice structured text, structured contents from that text. And so you're basically taking unstructured documents, and now you're actually creating structure from it. Now that you have that structure, that feeds very nicely into whatever use case you have from there, whether that's an analytics use case, do you want to flow it into a chatbot? Obviously, that can be done as well. So moving on just a little bit to the machine learning world, I could do a whole talk on machine learning, in itself. But what we'll talk about just today is just a couple really specific items regarding something that just got announced this week, which is around our feature store. So within Snowflake's machine learning capabilities, we have everything from notebooks to machine learning functions that are just very easy to use functions to do machine learning tasks. But we have modeling, feature store, model registry. So a lot of capabilities here. But what I want to highlight today is on the feature store front. And so just this week, we announced our feature store GA. And as part of that, we wrote a blog collaboratively with DBT on how nice it works with a feature store and DBT. And so if you guys are not familiar with a feature store, like in a data science workflow, it's basically your single place where you can go to leverage the individual pieces of whether it's a numerical column or an attribute for a machine learning model. It's one place where you can go and serve those features. Well, DBT is going to make this really nice for us, where say you're already managing your data pipelines today in DBT, which we are. Well, how can you actually plug in the machine learning, the data science team into that process? So they're not just spinning off their own features. You want to have that single unified view of data. And so what you can do here is leverage a table or a model, just in DBT as you are today, and then that model can be referenced in the Snowflake feature store, providing this single unified experience to have your features at scale. And there's a lot of benefits into that, so I would encourage you to check out the blog that just came out yesterday on DBT's blog. And by the way, on the machine learning world too, we have customers jointly with DBT that are even training models within their DBT pipelines, and so there's a ton of cool functionality that you can leverage DBT and Snowflake in this world as well. So why Snowflake and DBT Labs for AI and machine learning? So I've at least touched on some of this throughout, but one of the things where this gets really powerful is whenever you start to combine these different pieces over time. And so I gave the example of using document AI to extract out particular pieces of information from like an unstructured document. Well, say you have the example of you have those unstructured documents. I want to then extract these very specific terms out. Well, what if those terms are then used as features to a machine learning model? And then that machine learning model is then used to produce the content produced by an LLM to, for instance, give a personalized message to a user. And so you can start to see how you can start to chain these different pieces together. Well, that looks a lot like a data pipeline or model that you would see, within DBT Explore. And so that's really what we're seeing here is just, as you start to leverage Gen AI and machine learning in your pipelines, well, you want to have that full end-to-end observability of how does this one relate to this one, which relates to this one. That's perfectly what DBT gives, not only on the Gen AI and the machine learning model, but of course within the whole data flow itself. So what are some of the key DBT features for AI machine learning uses? This is not by any means exhaustive, but just gives you a flavor of some of the key features that are worth using here. And so testing. And so I didn't necessarily highlight this in detail on some of those kind of blueprints, but definitely leverage DBT test as part of this. And so for instance, within document AI, you're going to get an output representing the confidence of how, for a particular term that was extracted, how confident is that model for that particular extraction. That's a great use of a DBT test to say, hey, well, this doesn't exceed my business rule, So Warren or whatever the workflow needs to be from there. Incremental materialization, already talked about that multiple times here, but that's a really good use case to just make your life easy for those new records, new documents that are coming in over time. Macros, there's a lot of great capabilities here, like for instance with prompting, to say like, hey, I want to have kind of this prompt template in this format. I want to be able to throw in different variables. There's a lot of great use cases to leverage macros, leverage just all the dry principles that DBT provides there. Tagging, this is a case where just having any kind of dependency on AI or machine learning, for instance, in your workflows, tag those, or whatever makes sense for your particular business, but have some way to identify here's that dependency in my pipeline. And then of course DBT Mesh. Teams work independently and collaboratively, at the same time with these, with Gen AI and machine learning. So why Snowflake and DBT Labs for AI and machine learning powered pipelines? So again, with Snowflake, we're going to provide the enterprise-grade, secure AI machine learning. Again, your data doesn't have to go somewhere else. You can do that directly where your data already is. And then, of course, with DBT, you're going to get that, the versioning, the CI/CD, the testing, everything that we love about DBT, the orchestration, of those full pipelines, for instance. And then, as I just mentioned in that kind of that high-level architecture view in the previous slide, really having that unified view, end-to-end of data. Here's where Gen AI is inserted. Here's the dependency, with this machine learning model. Just really having that full unified end-to-end view with all of the data lineage that DBT for us. I mean, I think that's a huge opportunity to align your business with, hey, here's where Gen AI is actually inserted, and that's where you can start to gain more trust and confidence with the business. So final thing, I can't mention all of the AI capabilities and all of that without also mentioning the DBT for Snowflake native app. And so for those of you that haven't seen this, at our Snowflake Summit, DBT announced this application, which is really just an extension of the DBT experience. But one thing it really does is leverages AI directly in it. It has AskDBT, which is going to allow you to basically ask questions of your semantic layer. So for those of you that are using the semantic layer, it's an easy way to start getting or using AI directly in your world. So with that, thank you, and yeah, open up to any questions. And by the way, I do have some Snowflake support here as well.
First of all, on the latest slide, you were talking about...
On this one?
Yeah, the native app. And I have questions about all three of those bullet points. So data catalog, how is Horizon connecting to DBT or not? Observability with Snowflake tasks versus a DBT cloud job. And is this available for non-DBT cloud, for DBT core people?
Okay, yeah, there's multiple questions in there. Well, you had the mic, so I think you guys all heard. Regarding observability and Horizon integration, this is specifically anything that's in your DBT universe. And so like if it's Snowflake Horizon based, no, not necessarily. I think there's plenty of further integration capability that we can have with DBT on the Horizon front. As it relates to core versus cloud, and maybe I skipped one first, but as it relates to core versus cloud, yes, you do have to be a cloud to leverage this. All right, yes. And then what was...
Snowflake tasks, if they're using DBT cloud jobs, how does tasks come into it?
Yeah, so this would be orchestrated via DBT cloud.
The tasks are prepackaged. The Snowflake tasks to do the observability.
So this would be any of your jobs managed within DBT Cloud. Does that make sense?
Right. How does that connect to Snowflake tasks? Because they're very different.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be basically the same lens that you have within observability today within dbt. So I think maybe there's a little messaging snafu there. So yeah. Yes.
I'm loud enough.
Oh, just so they can hear us.
So one of the big asks of a lot of Snowflake users is we want to be able to tie our dbt runs to the cost in Snowflake, like very expensive queries. Having to tie those into the profiler is kind of painful. There's no clean way to do that, and especially as we start to get expensive Snowpark and Cortex jobs running out of dbt, like when we make our own UDFs. Is there a way to do that without like manually having to figure out, oh, this is from this dbt model, this thing, we'll see in the query history?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, within all of our Gen AI capabilities, there is the ability to track, for instance, like how many tokens. If you're running this particular Cortex complete function, you can track like what is the token usage for that. I think there's likely, or I'd love to pick your brain.
Find the actual code that most likely someone else wrote to tie it back if I'm a Snowflake administrator, right?
Right.
Or I'm the one controlling Snowflake response. So
Yes.
that's the missing piece for us.
Yeah, I mean, and there are packages for that to make your life easier. There's further integration capabilities, but
There's not, but it's an ask.
there's further integration capabilities, though, I'll say.
Not really along the lines of like integration capabilities, but I have seen tools do this, and I think you could do it in your own dbt code, but you could add like a comment into your dbt code so that when you go into the query history, you can directly see which model it corresponds to. Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah,
anyways.
I mean, yeah, thank you.
We have. Like, we've done that. If you have a lot of runs going on all the time, for sure. There's lots of incremental things it's hard.
Yeah. But yeah, tagging. Any other questions?
I'm curious if your Cortex pricing is keeping up with the rapid iteration in the AI world. So it's very difficult to keep up with, Claude or OpenAI in terms of just quality and pricing. So is that something? I mean, OpenAI has dropped their price like 90% plus over the last year or two.
Yeah.
Is that something you're keeping up with?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, that's for sure front of mind. I mean, and another thing, like I didn't highlight it, for instance, but like one of the key use cases here is like on the text processing side where it's like, okay, a perfect example would be like, I want to take text and then I want to classify that text. Well, you're going to get better performance if you use one of the top models out there, a larger parameter model. But that's where we have, like, for instance, fine tuning, where okay, well, I want to leverage one of those smaller parameter models, and then all of a sudden I'm cutting that cost way down, and you just have to go through the fine tuning step to do it. But like that would be like one example use case where I would have to use one of those larger models to get the performance that I'm looking for. But then you leverage fine tuning, and now all of a sudden you can. What's that? You would technically you're using credits for the fine tuning, but that is just a one-time thing, and then you're just leveraging one of those smaller models, and so your cost per run is going to drop down significantly at that point.
Are all of these features available at any tier of Snowflake account?
So some of these features were like enterprise only and above. So like feature store, for instance, is enterprise only and above.
And do you have, or on your roadmap or /feature request, GitHub repo of examples of utilizing this?
That is going to be, yes, front of my. So I'm actually a partner sales engineer for the relationship with dbt, and so yes, all of these will be examples shortly. So again, we have the feature store blog that just came out, and then there's already a blog out there, for instance, on like a lot of the Cortex complete kind of functions that we just saw. But what we'll shoot to do is like more like quick starts in some of our like the normal kind of capabilities that we are, what materials that we have there.
Yes, a quick question. So does it require DBT Cloud to use the Cortex integration, or it can also be on DBT Core?
Both, yeah.
Both?
Yep.
Okay.
One DBT. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Cool. All right, thank you guys.